I have a confession to make. I don't really listen to post-punk music. It's not because I think the music is sad and depressing, and it's not because I think the guitars are too modulated. It's because I'm scared of the goth girls that listen to it. Jokes aside, I've always found it to be an interesting genre, and although I've heard songs here and there, I could never really get into it. However, recently a friend of mine asked me to create a post-punk song that you might hear in a goth nightclub for a game that she's making, and I was like, well, I can try. I was given free reign to do whatever I wanted with it, with the only direction to be make it like that Molchat-Doma. Make it sound like that Molchat-Doma song, you know the one. It only took 2 hours to make the instrumental, and then a few days later I went and added some vocals. For this video, I thought it'd be interesting just to show off the overall process of making the song, and to pose the question, does the finished product sound like a post-punk track? I guess we'll find out. I started off with the tempo. Since I was going off the
Molchat-Doma,
I just decided to make it within the ballpark of that, which to me was roughly 166 beats per minute. When I finished the song, I posted it to Instagram, and a friend of mine who actually listens to the genre informed me the tempo was a bit on the fast side, but regardless, they thought it was cool and fit within the genre well, so I was happy to hear that. Next, I was tasked with setting up the drums. For a lot of my own personal recordings, I use MIDI drums, but for my own laziness, and since Logic makes it pretty easy to do this, I use Logic's drummer feature. I do know how to play the drums, but I'm not very good, and I'm also very out of practice. Most importantly of all, I can't really record the drums because I lack the proper setup and microphones to properly record a kit. I went ahead and picked this indie disco beat, and I adjusted some of the parameters to fit the style and the beat I had in mind, and then I just looped the whole thing for 5 minutes. I didn't really know what the structure would look like, so I just set up the drums to have a groove to play to so I could just go ahead and record something and edit the whole thing later. For the bass guitar, this is kind of when the song came together and the structure came together. To make things easy for myself, I just made the song in the key of E minor. I didn't use a single effect pedal for this, instead I just plugged the bass directly into my interface. I usually record my bass this way for a lot of my own personal recordings. In my opinion, it's good enough, and certainly good enough for this kind of project. I picked this stock preset which had a chorus effect, which is kind of the sound I was thinking of when I was imagining the song. I recalled when I used to work at a radio station and one of the live bands I helped engineer had a chorus effect on the bass. It just sounded appropriate for this genre, so I used that. With all that out of the way, it was time to come up with something, so here's what I came up with. I only had a single idea going into the project, which I felt could be maybe like a chorus melody on the guitar. While thinking about the melody, I did have an idea to use this chord progression. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's a 6-4-1, but the 6 is like a minor. It's something I've used a few times in my own music, but I heard it in a song the day before I did this, so I guess it was just fresh in my mind and that's why I used it. I noodled around a bit, coming up with different notes for the bass line before recording the whole thing in one take. The idea was just lay down verse, chorus, and then verse and chorus again. I did end up making some decisions on the fly, like leaving a small break before the first chorus, and also resolving the chorus on an A at the end just before jumping into the verse again. The ending was supposed to be reserved for a complicated guitar riff, but I didn't really end up doing that, and you'll see that later. And yes, the bass line was done in a single take. Obviously, I had some riffs and stuff before I hit the record button, but I think because I knew the song wasn't something I was trying to take super seriously as my own, but rather just come up with something random, I completely just YOLO'd it. It was a pretty freeing feeling in a way, and it makes me want to come up with more projects like this in the future. I definitely got a bit carried away when I started to do tracks for the guitars. Aside from the chorus melody, I had all these ideas, but I had to show some restraint and just limit myself to a few different guitar tracks. In the end, I only used about 4 of them. 2 for the main parts, 1 as a way to beef up the sound in certain areas of the track and keep it dynamic, and a guitar solo. Again, I picked presets that were kind of more modulated as far as chorus and flanger, because the only post-punk tracks I'm vaguely familiar with have these effects in them. I started off with a bass rhythm track that followed the bass just to kind of make an outline, and then I added the chorus melody. Afterwards, I added the beef part, which I played through the whole track at first, but then I realized it needed to be more reductive, so I just trimmed it down to certain parts. There were also some sections where I thought I might keep open again to make it dynamic. I filled those sections with random harmonics and guitar noises to give the song some character. One of these spots was the ending. I thought that I really wanted to come up with a cool melodic guitar riff to finish off the song. In the end, I just got lazy and made a bunch of guitar noise. It somehow worked though, so I'm quite satisfied with it. Towards the end, I recorded the very first intro melody, and then lastly, the guitar solo. For the guitar solo sound, I picked another flanger type preset. The delay on it was like way too much, so I had to turn it down immediately. My first take of the guitar solo was a bit too shreddy and bluesy, which is somewhat a vice of mine, so the second one I made a bit more melodic and slightly dialed back. Personally, for me, I feel like I mailed it in. No one would probably think of it that way but me, but the goal of the project was just to keep it simple and work on it quickly, so I just left it in. If it was one of my own songs, I'd probably spend hours slaving away at it, but I suppose this is a lesson for me to learn to not always do that. To be honest, I didn't really plan to do vocals for the song, but I figured it might be fun just to come up with something silly for the lyrics. I thought it would be funny to just sing about the trope of shy dudes trying to approach girls in the club, so I just kind of went with that. The goth girls in the club, they look so sad when they dance, and the straight guys in the back won't take a passing chance. I didn't sit in an isolated room or had any special way to record the vocals. I figured since it was supposed to sound a bit nightclubby, I figured any artifacts in the recording would just be fine. I added a tape delay and some reverb to the vocals and EQ'd them just to make them poke out in the mix just a tiny bit. Everybody in the town heads down to the floor. Overall, the track required pretty minimal production, but there's a few things to note. I decided to pan the guitars left and right a ways to open up the sound just a little bit more. The beef track ended up going with the chorus melody, but the guitar solo stayed right in the middle because just to give it some presence. During the mixing process, I did turn the volume down really low just to hear how it sounded. Some advice I remember hearing before is you want to be able to hear the vocals and the snare drum even when the mix is super quiet, so I adjusted those accordingly, and I also decided to boost the bass drum a bit considering I wanted to give it a club feel. I also added some master reverb to the whole track for the reason that I wanted to make it sound like it was in a nightclub. Not so much reverb so it became muffled, but enough to give it some atmosphere. After that, I just boosted the overall volume with the limiter by a considerable amount, and that was it. Here's the result. If you like to listen to the full version, this track is available for streaming and download on my Bandcamp. Feel free to check it out along with some of my other music. As far as the game my friend's working on, if that interests you, I've added a link in the description that will lead you to an Instagram that she's set up for it. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to follow my other social media and donate to my Ko-Fi. Of course, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.